Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Political Vigilante. Thank you for joining us and watching the show and supporting what I do. You can support me at patreon.com/Graham Elwood. Subscribe, share the videos, do all that stuff. Positive comments, all that stuff. Watch the ads. Don't click skip ad. When you click skip ad, I don't get paid. That's what us independent journalists have to do. And my guest here is very familiar with that. She is a contributor to Consortium News and the host of the Unity for J online vigils. Welcome back to the show, Elizabeth Lea Vos. How you doing?
I'm great, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yeah, I just wanted to, we hadn't talked in a while, and I don't think I had my new fancy studio the last time we talked. It might have just been talking through my iPhone.
Yeah, I believe it was, yeah.
With just a blue Batman light behind me, like any real professional journalist. So I also wanted to, thank you because I just, one of the fans of this show, one of the political vigilantes of this show sent their hard-earned money so that I could go fly up to San Francisco and be at the World Press Freedom Day, which was basically honoring Julian Assange or trying to free them, get the word out about Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning. And that all happened as a result of meeting you. I read something you wrote and did a video on it, and then we had a Skype, and then you turned me on to Susie Dawson and the Unity for J movement, and that's been really cool. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome, and I'm really glad that you've participated in those vigils and the solidarity events with Assange. It's been great to have you, and there are so many comedians that have been really supportive of Assange, to a greater extent than any sort of mainstream press journalist. I think it's really fantastic to have you all participate in this.
Thank you. I think, we kind of realize it as artists, and as, we're, especially comedians, we're always told, can't say this, can't say that, can't say, usually just about saying something, offensive or whatever. But none of us are like whistleblowers typically. But we understand that like constant thumb of censorship, and especially with this corporate media. I mean, I've talked about this a lot. Jimmy Dore and I have talked about it on his show of, if you want to be successful as a comedian in show business, you better not go up against the ruling elite, the ruling class, because I always make this point. People think they don't just own MSNBC and Fox. They own all of it. They own so-called online channels that do fun videos. They own Comedy Central, any channel, any outlet that puts out comedy, they own it. So that's why Saturday Night Live, when Julian gets jailed, does a sketch and makes him out to be a Bond villain.
Yeah, it's insidious, and it's really, really despicable to see them doing that. But it's not surprising, unfortunately. I mean, it's just another arm of the establishment press that has just been, state stenographers, to use that phrase that may be a cliche at this point, but it really is applicable. And I think that it seems, I'm no expert in the history of comedy, but I think really good comedy has always been, an affront to power and critical of sort of the status quo. And I think that the real independent comedians, like the independent journalists out there, are doing a great job of pointing out the absurdities and flaws of establishment narratives, whether it's about Assange or Russiagate or a number of other issues. So.
Yeah, comedians throughout history, I think, have already done that. But even just the last sort of 50 years of the kind of modern stand-up comic, standing at a nightclub with a microphone, that sort of era of comedy started, was really in like the 50s and 60s. And that was like Lenny Bruce and Dick Gregory and George Carlin. And, they called out the powerful. They said this wasn't right. They called out, social ills and everything. And that's, what inspired me. I was inspired by like Richard Pryor and Bill Hicks. And, I was also inspired by like Steve Martin just being silly or whatever. But what they talked about when I was young, I was like, man, I want to do that. And to now see so many of them, the late night talk show hosts, they are just, they'll make fun of Trump's haircut or whatever, but then like you watch Stephen Colbert and Tulsi Gabbard's on, and he's calling her an Assad apologist. I mean, he's basically just repeating CIA talking points. I'm just like, I'm mystified at that. I mean, I get it.
Absolutely.
But
yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Colbert, because actually recently I wrote part of a series that Consortium News is publishing on WikiLeaks publications and the content that WikiLeaks has published. And the reason that they're doing that is because they want to focus the lens back onto the content of the WikiLeaks publications, rather than buying into this kind of narrative, this debate about whether Assange is a good or bad person, focusing on his personality and all of that. But to get to the point, the first publication was about collateral murder. And in that piece, we included an interview that Colbert did with Assange way back in 2010, like within days of the publication of Collateral Murder. And, Colbert, again, and to go to your point, even then, Colbert was really, in the interview, regurgitating establishment talking points, even as far back as 2010. So I think that really does... it shows the importance of comedy, that Assange and Tulsi would be interviewed by Colbert, but it's really unfortunate that comedian was just basically performing as the voice of the state. So
he's the comedic voice of the state. He's just another player in there. Like I always say, it's like Sean Hannity and Rachel Maddow are just professional wrestling characters, or they're just soap opera characters in the the drama, the deep state drama that we watch unfold every day. But I want to get into, since you obviously are following this very closely, and you host the Unity for J online vigils, and now they're starting to be, that one I went to last week, they're starting to be more in-person vigils, since he and Chelsea have been jailed. What is the status of Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning like right now?
Well, right now, both of them are imprisoned. Assange is in what has been called the United Kingdom's Guantanamo Bay. It's Belmarsh prison, while Chelsea Manning is imprisoned in the United States. And recently, very recently, her lawyers filed, I believe it was basically a complaint saying that she would never submit to the coercion to participate in the grand jury against WikiLeaks and Assange. And so basically, though, she's being held not in punishment for any sort of conviction or crime, but simply to coerce her into cooperation with this grand jury. And part of the reason that she's refusing to go to participate in that process is that grand juries are not the same thing. They do not operate in the same way that normal trials do. They're in secret. She is not allowed to have defense counsel or her lawyers present when she testifies before a grand jury. It's a completely different scenario. So, but, going back over to Assange's situation, just the day before, World Press Freedom Day, you had Assange on May 2nd, I believe, basically, convicted of having breached bail and sentenced to 50 weeks in prison in the UK. But meanwhile, his lawyers said, if I remember correctly, that they were not going to focus on fighting that, because eventually the sentence would be reduced to 25 weeks. But if they fought the case and lost their fight or appeal against that it could be worse or increased, I believe. And then in addition to that, we have the beginning of the rendition process against Assange, extradition process against Assange, trying to get him to the US to face a charge that basically, as Glenn Greenwald very accurately pointed out, that has nothing to do with hacking, has nothing to do with breaking in illegally to any system, but simply was an attempt that may not have even been successful to help Manning retain her anonymity in accessing documents and files that she was legally at the time allowed to access via her top secret clearance. So that's the situation as far as I know it with Assange and with Chelsea Manning. It's very unfortunate. The people who were involved with revealing the US's war crimes and evidence of war crimes are the ones who are being punished for their honesty and for their leaks and publications. The other news sort of in the last couple of days is that Assange has had his first social visit with Pamela Anderson and Kristen Hafrenson. And also he was seen recently by the UN Rapporteur on Torture, who has not released his findings yet, but did manage to meet with him, I think, earlier today in the UK. So
I mean, first of all, to be clear, the main objective of the United States is to get him extradited here so that they can probably kill him, I guess. I don't know. I mean, like, they're going to, he's going to fall down on a knife 15 times by accident or shoot himself in the head like Gary Webb did when he committed suicide. So, I mean, I don't like, that's obviously the clear goal, and they're concocting. I mean, the fact that they're accusing Assange they're trying to say that he coerced Chelsea Manning into hacking, right? That's what they're trying to get.
Right, and that's absolutely not what was shown in the evidence. And it's interesting too, because the evidence that that the Trump administration is using to try and charge Assange and prosecute Assange with was public. And again, Glenn Greenwald and Kevin Costello of Shatterproof have done a number of really great articles on this subject, where they point out that this was public knowledge as far back as, I believe, 2011. And the Obama administration, who are no angels when it comes to whistleblowers and the treatment of whistleblowers, they refused to prosecute Assange on that same information and material during the Obama administration, because they felt it would be a danger to free speech, the freedom of the press. And they basically called it the New York Times problem. So I think that it's really, really disheartening to see the Trump administration go where even the Obama administration feared to tread, as far as prosecution of Assange based on this previously public material.
Yeah, and it's so crazy, like, too, like the point of I remember we were talking about this on Aggressive Progressives, Ron Placone and Kim Iverson and myself, and she even brought up a point, like, even if he did get the stuff illegally, it's still, what he did was the right thing. Like, it's
absolutely.
I mean, the point I brought up, it's like, if, let's say, the Spotlight reporters for the Boston Globe illegally broke into the Archdiocese of Boston and stole documents, which technically is a crime, but it showed that they've been covering up pedophile priests, and that prevented future children from getting molested, then they're heroes.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, it's the same thing in the sense that they, in 2013, the court-martial process of Chelsea Manning, in that process, the U.S. authorities were forced to admit that there were no deaths as a result of her leaks. And instead, we have, so basically we have no harm that was documented from Chelsea Manning's releases through WikiLeaks. And at the same time, what those releases did reveal was essentially, in a number of cases, the cover-up by the United States of murders of civilians, and in the case of collateral murder of journalists. So I think that instead of the WikiLeaks publications of Manning's material being something that was harmful to the nation, it was beneficial. It was revealing the crimes of the U.S. And I think that, it's typical of a state that is just wanting to cover up its own crimes to retaliate like this against Assange and Manning. But I think it's really disappointing that some of the public have been, I guess, propagandized into thinking that they really did harm the country. And I think, obviously, that's very inaccurate.
Well, if they harm the country, then Ben Bradley should have been put in jail for publishing the Pentagon Papers in the Washington Post in the 70s.
Exactly.
And they just did a movie last year that was, showing how much of a hero he was, and the woman that owned the paper with him, that played by Meryl Streep. So,
yeah, when the Washington Post does it, it's worth a movie. And when Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning do it, then they should be, tortured and put into prison. So it's ridiculous. It is absurd.
It also shows at least on the left, the selective outrage of the left, right? I bring this up a lot. They are all, they're all LGBTQ rights. They're all for that, until a transgender soldier releases documents that show America and the American empire committing war crimes. Then we're just kind of be quiet about it. Or we're going to call Julian a Russian asset.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting too, because you have some sections of the public seem to support Manning, and so maybe the liberal aspect of the public, some of it supports Manning, but not Assange. They dislike Assange because of the 2016 publications by WikiLeaks. But then in the reversal of that, you have right-wing people who will support Assange because of 2016, but do not support Manning. So I think that it's really horrendous to see that level of manipulation of the public to support one half of, I mean, the fact is that without WikiLeaks, Manning would never have been able to publish the material that she leaked, because the New York Times, the Washington Post would not publish her material. And without Manning, WikiLeaks would not be the organization that it is. Without her, those leaks could not have happened. So I think that, you cannot hate one side of that coin and have, a really defensible position, in my opinion. I just want to add very quickly that I got my date wrong earlier. Assange was convicted and sentenced earlier, and on May 2nd, the extradition proceedings against him began. So just to clarify.
Okay, that's good to know. But it's a great point that you bring up, and it shows the effectiveness of the ruling class creating this ridiculous two-party system to keep us divided, where everybody just has this. And I've had this with friends of mine, or just people I know that are either big neoliberals or conservatives. They'll always criticize all the stuff of the other party, and I'll go, yep. And I go, and the party that you like, though, does this, this, and this. And they're like, well, and it's like, what do you mean, no. Like, I was, talking.
Exactly.
They were like, my liberal friends, like, oh, Trump, what he's doing at the border. Yeah, it's awful. Obama separated people at the border. You know that, right? Like,
exactly.
I mean,
and in that sense, Trump is good in the sense that he is revealing things that maybe would have been, looked over, passed over under Obama. But it is terrible to see people basically say, well, Obama is doing this horrible thing in Syria, or Yemen, and supporting Saudi Arabia. But then Obama did do the same thing. So there are lots of cases where that, whether it's sanctions against Venezuela, so much of the policy Trump is carrying out is just a continuation of the Obama administration.
Which was a continuation of the Bush
Exactly.
Policy, which was built on the deregulation and corporate policies of Clinton and the Bush before him. And I mean, it's just ridiculous. So where do you think, as we wrap up here, where do you think, well, two things. Where do you think this is going with Julian and Chelsea, and what also could people who are viewing this do?
Well, I think that unfortunately what is going, I see, and this is just my opinion, but I think that what we are seeing is the retaliation of the state against Manning and Assange, obviously. I think that it is going to be a very, very tough fight on both fronts of that. For both Assange and Manning. And so I would ask people, if they can, to donate to the Assange Defense Fund, to Manning's Defense Fund. I believe there are a number of different sites where you can donate to their cause, whether it's through WikiLeaks or through Manning's. I believe she has a donation page on the Courage Foundation website. But in addition to that, people, if you don't have money to spare, and a lot of people are in that situation, I would try to attend any vigils that you can, any events that show solidarity with Assange and Manning. I would ask you to, contact your representatives, whether you're in the United States or elsewhere, and make it clear that it's an issue that matters to you and that you want the United States and the UK to back off on this subject. I also would ask people to just talk to people that you know in your own life and explain to them why this is so important to all of us, why it's important for free press, and do what you can to make your voice heard and empower yourself to do action, because that's exactly what Assange and Manning did. They've risked their lives by standing up and doing what was right, even when it was risky and inconvenient and dangerous. So I think we have to thank them by acting on their behalf and in support of them. So.
Those are great. So everybody watching, I'll put links to those places where you can support their defense funds in the show notes, so you can go right and help those things out. And as Elizabeth Lea Vos said, go to the vigils and like, when people say, oh, Assange is a rapist, point them to like Caitlin Johnstone's article that she just did on Medium.com. Read that. Caitlin Johnstone, who is a survivor of sexual assault, saying, nope, this is the facts of it, because that's just sort of a tactic they used to just get people to go, oh, he's a rapist. I don't like him, And so thank you so much for taking your time, and we appreciate you being on the show. Thanks everybody for watching. Like I said, like, subscribe, tour dates. We're going to the East Coast, Ron Placone and I, June 12th through the 19th. Go to grahamelwood.com for all my tour dates. Thanks for watching.